Have you ever met someone who is just breathtakingly bad at something, but they walk around with the confidence of a world champion? It's one of those things that just makes you scratch your head. Well, today we're going to dive into the fascinating science behind why the most incompetent people often have absolutely no clue that they're incompetent.
All right, so let's kick this off with a story. It starts back in 1995 with a guy named MacArthur Wheeler. Now, Wheeler decided he was going to rob not one, but two banks in Pittsburgh, in broad daylight. And get this, he didn't wear a mask, no disguise, nothing. He just walked right in. And, as you can probably guess, the police found him and arrested him that same night.
Okay, but here's where the story goes from a simple crime to something else entirely. When the police show Wheeler the surveillance tapes, crystal clear video of his face, he's just baffled. He looks at it in total shock and mumbles, "But I wore the juice. The juice." Turns out he was completely convinced that if he rubbed lemon juice on his face, he would be invisible to security cameras.
And that right there is the big question, isn't it? MacArthur Wheeler wasn't joking. He was dead serious. He thought his plan was foolproof. So how can someone be so incredibly wrong, yet feel so supremely confident? How is that even possible?
Well, this absolutely bizarre case ended up catching the eye of two psychologists over at Cornell University, David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger. And they didn't just see a funny story. They saw a deep, scientific puzzle about how we see ourselves and how we often fail to see ourselves clearly at all.
Their entire investigation really boiled down to one simple question, inspired by our friend with the lemon juice. Could it be that the very thing that makes a person incompetent is the same thing that prevents them from even realizing they're incompetent in the first place?
So to test this wild idea, they came up with this brilliant experiment back in 1999. And the beauty of it was how simple it was. It was so direct, and it ended up revealing something really profound about human nature.
Okay, so here's how it worked. First, they got a bunch of students and gave them tests on different skills. Things like grammar, logical reasoning, even judging what's funny. Then, after they took the test, they asked each student, "So how do you think you did compared to everyone else? Rank yourself." And finally, the simple part, they just compared what the students thought their score was to what their score actually was. Easy enough, right?
Well, what they found wasn't just a random fluke. It was a predictable, shocking, and honestly, a pretty profound pattern that perfectly explained the strange confidence of the man who wore the juice.
This chart basically says it all. Check out the folks at the bottom 25% of performers. By definition, their actual test scores were low. But look at where they thought they were. They rated themselves way, way higher than they actually were. And what's really interesting is if you look at the top performers, they actually did the opposite. They tended to slightly underestimate how well they did.
Let's put some real numbers on this to see how dramatic it is. The group that did the worst, that bottom quarter of students, their actual average score landed them in the 12th percentile. I mean, that's almost at the very bottom of the pile. And where did that same group think they were? On average, they guessed they were at the 62nd percentile, well above average. That huge gap between 12 and 62? That's it. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect right there in the data.
So the big question is why? Why does this happen? Well, Dunning and Kruger came up with this idea they called the dual burden, or sometimes you hear it called the double curse of incompetence. To get it, we need to know this one key term, metacognition. Sounds complicated, but all it means is thinking about your own thinking. It's that voice in your head that can step back and say, am I really sure about this? Or maybe I should double check that. It's self-awareness.
So here's the double curse. For people with low skills in an area, their first problem is obvious. They don't have the skills to get the right answers. But the second, and much deeper problem, is that their lack of skill also means they don't have the tools to even spot their own mistakes. They can't see how badly they're doing. On the flip side, high performers have the skills to do well, and those same skills let them see what they don't know, which is why they can sometimes be a little less confident.
Let me just boil it all down to one sentence, because this is the whole idea. The skills you need to be good at something are the very same skills you need to recognize that you're not good at it. If you don't have them, you are literally blind to your own blindness.
Now, of course, this isn't just about us pointing and laughing at other people. This has huge implications for every single one of us. Because, let's be honest, we're all incompetent at something.
David Dunning himself summed it up with this perfect, kind of funny quote. And that's the really scary part, right? If the whole point is that you don't know what you don't know, how can you ever be sure that you're not in the club right now on some topic?
Now, to be fair, in the world of science, there's always a healthy debate. Some researchers think this isn't purely a psychological bias, but that it's partly just a statistical quirk, something called regression to the mean. It's a bit complicated, but they think that might make the effect look bigger than it is. But, and this is a big but, the core finding that low performers consistently and significantly overestimate their skills has been shown again and again and again in all sorts of fields.
Okay, so that leads us to the most important part of this whole conversation. If we all have these blind spots, if we're all potential members of this club in some area of our lives, what on earth can we do about it? Is there an antidote?
And the answer seems to be something called intellectual humility. It's basically the skill of recognizing the limits of your own knowledge. It means being genuinely open to the idea that you might be wrong. It's about actively looking for feedback, especially from people who see the world differently than you do.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought. The real challenge in life isn't just learning more things. It's getting better at knowing what you don't know. So the question for all of us is, how do you find your own blind spots? How do you find your own personal lemon juice?